Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying.
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, September 30th, last day of September as we enter into October and the final three games for the LA Galaxy of the regular season. Galaxy already assured a playoff spot here. So not fighting for that, but the Galaxy looking to clinch that top spot in the Western Conference, ensure home field advantage for the Western Conference side of the playoffs, and possibly, you never know, possibly host MLS Cup coming up in December. Is it December? I feel like it's December. It goes all the way. It's going to be a long road, right? You expect the LA Galaxy to stick in there. So we're going to get you ready as the LA Galaxy get ready for Colorado on Wednesday, and then a game on Saturday coming up against Austin, the very last home game. So a little bit to talk about. Let's enter in the panda himself, Mr. Kevin Baxter. How you doing, bud?
All right. You know what's really weird?
Yes. What's really weird?
You're weird, but yeah.
Yes.
Is that
other than that,
enough for you? That no, we're recording this show in September,
right?
But most people aren't going to hear it until October.
Should we pretend it's October? Let's. Welcome to October,
here
everybody.
We go. Look, I got my.
Oh, your Man City calendar.
And there's September.
Okay.
Here we go, and then we're gonna. Now it's October, Kevin De Bruyne month.
Kevin De Bruyne month. Well, I mean, is that good news for the LA Galaxy or bad news for the LA Galaxy?
Well, it's bad news for Manchester United since De Bruyne is hurt. But I don't know how to.
You mean Manchester City?
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys. Which United City? They're probably the same team, right?
Let's go. Let's start this over with.
Yeah. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy. Yeah. Welcome to October. All right, everybody. Hope everybody had a nice little time off. Thank you for giving me a Thursday off. That doesn't happen too often whenever playoffs are creeping around the corner. The Galaxy didn't have a game. Results almost went the way. Almost 100% went the way for the LA Galaxy. RSL drawing in there. Colorado losing. But it was LAFC traveling to Cincinnati. I think there was some hope among Galaxy fans. It was one of the games that I had marked, which was LAFC coming off US Open Cup win, headed over to Cincinnati. Yeah, playing a 4:30 body clock time. Still it's not like a 1:30 body clock time. Just like to point that out. 4:30 is at least as good, which is 7:30 p.m. It's a night game in Cincinnati. Go out there and win 2-1. So LAFC wins. That gets them a little bit closer. It was one of the games in hand they had on the LA Galaxy. So we can look at some of these results, Kevin. I think it's a good place to start, just to sort of get everybody dip your toes back in as the Galaxy get ready to play against Colorado coming up. But it was Cincinnati, 1-2 losers to LAFC at home. DC United, 2-2 with Columbus. That's an interesting one. Miami and Columbus still play each other. And I think that's actually coming up on Wednesday. Is that Wednesday's game?
Well, they just played this weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, they. Let's see. Hold on. I'm gonna go look in here and see what it was. But I was reading through some of the things that were happening, and I was like, oh, okay, no problem. This makes a lot of sense. trying to think. Miami and Columbus coming up on Wednesday. Here it is.
Wow.
The Columbus is at home. Miami is there. Apparently, Miami clinches the supporter shield should they beat Columbus in this. Right. So something to watch there as well. But that's something to pay attention to. Let's go back over here into the results. Miami and Charlotte 1-1. That was a little bit of surprise. Charlotte getting a point on the road in Miami. Montreal 3-0 over San Jose. New England 1-0 over Nashville. Red Bulls getting trounced at home by New York City 5-1. It is 1-1 with Philadelphia and Atlanta. Austin and RSL, that was a big number for the LA Galaxy. RSL playing the game they had in hand over the Galaxy, come up with only a point and not 3, so they can't close the gap that much. In fact, LAFC jumps over them. We'll go over the standings here in a second. Chicago and Toronto 1-1. Dallas loses to Orlando. Orlando's coming on full speed. Let's see if what they can do with any of that momentum they're carrying. And then the big game for the Galaxy again, 3-0 win for Minnesota over Colorado. We'll talk about that game a little bit, but that was one that the LA Galaxy wanted to go that way. St. Louis 3-1. St. Louis eliminated from the playoffs, 3-1 winners over Sporting Kansas City. Then you had Seattle 1-0 over Houston at home, and then Vancouver 1-1 with Portland. So that's how that's stacked up, Kevin.
By the way, don't sleep on the Sounders. The Sounders are coming on. They had a horrible start to the season, but they're coming on now.
And you always want to look at them as one of those teams that is dangerous, especially whenever you get around playoffs times.
And if they finish, you're going to show the standings in a minute, but if they finish in the top 4, they will have some playoff games at home. They're 5th right now. If they finish in the top 4, they will at least have the home field advantage for that 3-game playoff to start, and maybe after that, depending on other results. And remember, Seattle is a really bad place to go play in the playoffs because it's cold, it's going to be rainy, it's on the carpet, the fans are loud. It's a bad place to play. If Seattle can get one more spot and get at least the first series at home, they're going to be a little bit more dangerous than they appeared to be just about a month, 6 weeks ago. Yeah,
and as we look at it, standings calling out that all places except for 2, so it's only basically the play-in game now where we haven't decided in terms of teams, right? So we don't know exact positions, but in terms of teams, and as it stands, LA Galaxy have clinched a spot, LAFC are in the spot, Salt Lake City are in the spot. Colorado is in the spot there. Seattle, Houston, and Vancouver have all clinched a playoff spot. So they are in the playoffs. Where they'll land, we don't know. But that means that there are just 2 spots remaining and 4 teams fighting for them. So Minnesota, 45 points. Portland, 45 points. Dallas, 37 points. That's going to be a big gap for Dallas to try to make up on Portland. And then you have Austin at 36. The LA Galaxy getting ready to play Austin on Fan Appreciation Night on Saturday. So these are all big games for everybody. Austin will certainly be hoping that they have some chance at jumping up, but it's going to be a slog for them, where they're 9 points behind that, the Portland side that it's at 45. So there's a gap opening up. The teams have been eliminated. You have St. Louis eliminated, Kansas City eliminated, and San Jose eliminated.
And Austin could be eliminated before they come to Dignity Health Sports Park, right? They could be out by then.
They could be. Yeah, there are
or
some
Portland win.
There are some scenarios out there right now. I was looking at I had it up earlier, but MLS sent out their clinching, playoff clinching and elimination stuff and all that fun stuff. This is Inter Miami clinches the 2024 Supporters Shield with an Inter Miami win at Columbus Crew. That is a clinching scenario. Charlotte clinches an MLS playoff berth with some razzle dazzle in there. Nashville is eliminated from Audi 2024 MLS Cup playoff contentions with, and there's some 3 or 4 different things. Western Conference clinch playoff berths for the LA Galaxy, LAFC, Real Salt Lake, Colorado Rapids, Seattle Sounders, Houston Dynamo, Vancouver Whitecaps, and eliminated so far San Jose, Sporting Kansas City, St. Louis. LAFC can clinch home field advantage in round 1 best-of-3 series with an LAFC win versus St. Louis City and a Real Salt Lake loss versus Minnesota United and a Houston Dynamo loss versus New England Revolution and a Colorado Rapids loss versus the LA Galaxy and Vancouver Whitecaps FC draw versus Sounders FC. That is a clinching scenario for home field advantage for LAFC. There are none for the LA Galaxy.
But the Galaxy situation is a lot clearer. And by the way, LAFC, the team chasing the Galaxy, they have 4 games left. 3 of them against the 3 teams at the bottom of the table.
Yep.
They play St. Louis, then Kansas City, then Vancouver. At Vancouver, Vancouver's already clinched. They certainly would like to move up. But that game will be during the international break, October 13th. So LAFC will be missing 3 starters. And as you and I talked about before the show, if you look at the standings, the Galaxy have not even clinched home field advantage for that first playoff series. If they drop their last 3 games, Colorado and I think Salt Lake could both pass. Well, and LAFC could pass them. They could fall. They could actually fall behind Seattle and lose home field advantage in the playoffs for the first round. I don't think that's going to happen. What they're looking at more is that the Galaxy, if they get 7 points, which means they have to go unbeaten in their last 3 games, if they get 7 points, LAFC cannot catch them.
Right.
If LAFC loses one of those games, they only need 4 points.
Yeah, so that's guaranteed that if the LA Galaxy wins 7 points out of the last 3 games, like you said, that would mean they don't lose any of their last 3 games, 2 wins, 1 draw. Any combination of that is a guarantee that they would finish first in the Western Conference. There's nothing LAFC can do about that. Then you talk about reactive points, which are, should LAFC lose a game, that type of thing, Galaxy would only need 4 points. So there's lots of things that are going to move around in this, right? But for the most part now, Kevin, you see a large portion of the league right now is now up to 31 games. Most teams are at 31 games now. There are some with 30. There's a couple here and there. But for the most part, you have 31 games played, which means most of the game in hands have now been made up on the LA Galaxy. So it's a little bit better understanding of where that sits, right?
And if the Galaxy win at Colorado, I believe they eliminate, as far as trying to finish atop the conference, they eliminate everybody but LAFC. So a win would make the picture a little bit clearer. And by the way, if you're wondering, the first tiebreaker is wins. The Galaxy have the most wins in the conference, so they're looking pretty good there. The second tiebreaker is goal differential, correct?
Yes, hold on, I have it right here. So total number of wins, and then goal differential, and then goals for, and then fewest disciplinary points, then away goals differential, then away goals for. Hold on, I like saying all of them. Home goals differential, home goals for, and then a coin toss. Or drawing of lots if there are 3 or more. Can we get a drawing of lots? Not for the Galaxy, but for somebody. Like, I always enjoy the drawing of a lot.
That's only number 9. Number 10 is scissors, paper, rock.
That's right, 100%.
And so if you go back to the standings, the Galaxy are looking pretty good. They lead the conference in wins. I think they lead the conference in goals. Salt Lake has 1 behind. Salt Lake is really close on goals and goal differential. But the Galaxy do lead in all of those tiebreaker categories.
Right. They do.
So they're looking pretty good from that perspective as well. I was out at training today, and we talked to Greg Vanny a little bit about that, about the scenarios and stuff coming up. And I'm looking to see what he said. He said, we understand that if we win and we win out, then we're in. Then we win the West. We don't need anybody's help. But for us, he said it's about just trying to get into the best form and heading into the playoffs. So he's looking at 2 things. One is, we were asking him about the math and, if you do this and LAFC does that. And then he kind of just came back and said, look, if we win out, we don't have to do any math. The thing is we want to go into every game. We want to win every game. And then we want to feel good going into the playoffs. So that's the best way to look at it. Obviously, if they win out, it doesn't matter what LAFC does.
And I somewhat think, certainly looking ahead to the game in Colorado, you look at the Galaxy, and they were able to beat Vancouver. You get that 4-2 win. You get a little break off to let people rest and recuperate. And now you get to go fly at altitude against, Colorado, who played over the weekend. There seems to be some momentum behind the LA Galaxy if they can find a way to play against Colorado, which I think they can. I think that Colorado is susceptible, and certainly watching the Minnesota game, there could be reasons that Colorado's susceptible, but you're also looking at Colorado saying, wow, we just got blown out by Minnesota. We better have a reaction. This is going to be one of those games. Colorado, not an easy place for the LA Galaxy to play in and never has been. But do we think at this point, Kevin, just looking at the health, and we can talk about the update on Marco Reus, I'll let you give that information, but do we feel like the Galaxy are healthy enough at this point to be ready for the playoffs?
Well, I asked Greg Vanny about that today because Marco Reus did train today, did everything he was supposed to do. He's not going to make the trip to Colorado, or at least he's not going to play in Colorado. He may go to watch. Maybe he likes Denver. I don't know. But he's not going to play in Colorado. And Greg says he thinks he might be ready for the weekend. I think that's maybe Greg just trying to maybe give Austin something to think about. I think realistically, he'll play the last game against Houston, might not play until then. They don't need him really until then. If they can't beat Houston at home without Marco Reus,
or Austin,
why are we even,
Austin at home.
Austin, yeah. Why are we even doing this? So I do think that, you may not see Marco Reus until the last game of the season. But I asked Greg, I said, it seems like you're healthier than you've been all year. Audi's back now. Bergman is back. Everybody's healthy except for Marco Reus, who has, again, a problem. If it was a playoff game, he'd probably play. And Greg said, yeah, it's really close. It seems like we've always had 1 or 2 guys, but we've been able to limit to that and missing just 1 or 2 guys at a time. So, yeah, he said, we're healthy. Marco's situation is it's nothing big. He might be able to be available by the weekend, but right now where the goal is, we just want to stay healthy, perform, get great results. And he did talk a little bit about the schedule, which he says has been a little bit weird because they had Leagues Cup, then they had the Leagues Cup break, then they came back, then they had an international date, then they came back. Now they have another international date coming up. He talked about how much he loves this time of the year. He said it's a really exciting time of the year because with each game, the table becomes clearer and clearer. But he said it's also been really weird because it's been start, stop since Leagues Cup. And he said trying to keep the team on some sort of a rhythm has been really difficult. And I guess practices get a little tenser, a little more maybe high tempo because you don't have that game. So they try to recreate some sense of a game in those practices when they have a long break like they've had.
Yeah, you can sort of sense that. And again, I think it feels weird with everything that's going on. I think it's weird that if we look at the LA Galaxy schedule here, we can pull up the games. But I think it's weird that you're going to see 2 games this week. So this is a 2-match day week. And you have everybody playing on a Wednesday and then everybody playing on Saturday, right? Except for one team that will be out. But you have, Colorado coming up on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, it's the LA Galaxy home to Austin. And then there's no game again until 10/19. Right. And so, again, it's a big drop off between that 10-5. And it just feels like everything's rapid. Everything's going. You're going quickly. Everything's happening quickly. And then all of a sudden there's a slam of the brakes. Right. So the Galaxy play on 10-5 and then they have a whole week off, basically, all the way through the other side until you get to the 19th. That's a tremendous amount of time to be off right before the playoffs take it. It's 14 days. There's 2 weeks. There's 2 weeks, Kevin.
And there's another break in the playoffs. I mean, this scheduling with MLS is just atrocious because this is the time of the year you should be building that excitement. You should, be really looking at the schedule. Who do we play next? What's going to happen next? And it's like, we don't play for 10 days. We don't play for 2 weeks. Oh, the playoffs have started. This is great. And fans, I do believe casual fans, when there's that break, it's like, oh, my local team is in the playoffs. How come they're not playing this weekend? Is the season over? And they lose track with these international breaks. And I don't know what the idea is, how to get around that. That's something that MLS has never been able to figure out. But this is a really bad way to sort of run your season. This is the most exciting part. When you look at that schedule, best case scenario for the Galaxy is they win those 2 games. LAFC loses to Vancouver on the 13th, which is a bye week for the Galaxy. And then that Houston game doesn't mean anything because if they go to Houston needing even a point, Houston's a tough place to play. The Dynamo's been, the Achilles heel for the Galaxy late in the season. We can name the number of times that they've had bizarre results that cost the Galaxy playoff spots, late in the season, sometimes the last game with Houston. Again, going to Houston, we don't know what the weather's going to be like. Heck, it could be 100 degrees with 99% humidity. It could be a hurricane. We just don't know.
Right.
It's not a game where you want to say, yeah, we're going to go there and we need a couple points. We need to win. That's not the scenario. That's not the way they want to finish the season.
Yeah, and Houston in 6th place right now and possibly being able to move up in these next 3 games for them. And so how does that play out? And so that game could be very important for them. So you would like it for you to not be that important, but still go out there and put on, a good show. The Austin game, I think you can sit there and say, okay, if the Galaxy can't win there, and I'm sort of with you. If the Galaxy can't win there, what's going on here. The big problem that I have is the Colorado's a difficult place to play and always has been, right? So you can't rely on points there. So maybe Houston is the easier of those 2 games just because of how it goes. But you don't want to leave this to the last weekend. So certainly something to think about as the Galaxy get ready for that. Football Mania $2 super chat. He says, "Hey guys, nice to see Kevin at the presser today. You had a friend at the presser today, so
yes, I did.
All right,
one friend.
One friend. That was it. He was the only person that talked to you, huh?
Yeah,
I understand. Angelino said $2 super chat. Josh, any info about the sworn drop this Saturday? If you go on the Discord that we have somebody who tells us an awful lot about the sworn drop and everything else that is going on. It's a good plug for the Discord, quite honestly, but it's also because there is so many cool things that are coming out of the LA Galaxy's creative department in apparel, in that retail department, that I couldn't possibly keep you updated on everything. There is a drop. It is coming up this weekend. I believe there are a whole bunch of pieces, maybe 26 pieces possibly coming out of this overall collection, not all available on Saturday. So again, the collections are coming, the top quality gear is coming, so it's something you want to check out. If you go on the Discord, you will find that there are updates about all that stuff. So That's how we sort of look at that. And Nelson over there at the LA Galaxy, always keeping us updated on what's coming, what it looks like, and asking for feedback on everything too. The man is possessed by creative retail, Kevin. If you talk to him about it, he like lights up whenever he talks. It's just super
Who's this,
knowledgeable.
Nelson?
Nelson's awesome.
Yeah, he's got to let us know how much the stadium seats cost. Maybe that's not his.
That's not his.
That's not his
No,
thing.
that one's.
Can we talk about Colorado again for just a second?
We get to
moved on
talk
from that?
about Colorado the whole night. I mean, that's the next game coming up. We could talk about anything you want. So yes, absolutely.
Because that topic also came up today, and I've seen some people have already questioned you and I on social media about this. Going to play at altitude. The Galaxy did play in Salt Lake. It's different. It is altitude. Colorado is much higher. The effects are different. Some people are saying, why didn't they go there 48 hours ahead of time? Medical professionals, they're sort of the same opinion. There's two ways to handle altitude. One is you go there about a week ahead of time, get completely acclimated, and then you're fine. Or the other thing to do is to go there 24 hours or less before your event.
Right.
And the idea is that the altitude will not take effect. Supposedly, I don't know whether this part of this is true.
I feel it's 100% true. I go there
you
all the time.
still have the oxygen from sea level in your lungs,
Yeah, let me tell you. So I go to Colorado all the time. It's where my oldest lives. So whenever I fly in, so I get there, and I usually get there Friday morning. So I'll fly in about 10:30 a.m. Denver time. I get there. I am fine the entire day. I sleep well Friday night, not a problem. Go to sleep. Wake up the next day. Saturday is whenever I am like, oh man, where did this altitude come from? And it's usually like Saturday later in the evening, like that type of thing. So for me, it's always like I can feel it. We went up in the mountains the last time we did it, and so then it's even worse. Go take that Saturday and go up higher even, and then you really feel it. For me, it's one of those things. And altitude effectiveness is always a weird topic. We actually studied this in school. This was part of the physiology class that I would take at Arizona State in the physiology department for airlines and pilots and stuff like that. So we would go in an altitude chamber and do that stuff. One of the coolest things that I got to do on a regular basis was go in the altitude chamber, and the effects of exceptionally high altitude in small amounts of time are just nuts, Kevin. Hypoxia is such a crazy thing, and people who drink too much alcohol and alcohol poisoning, that's usually a hypoxic reaction, right? Because you're replacing the oxygen that's in the bloodstream with alcohol, and that actually can lead you to a hypoxic state, which is a lack of oxygen. Dude, I'll tell you this one thing though. Whenever I did the altitude chamber the first time, they set you in there and they take the altitude chamber up to 28,000 feet. Remember, you're sitting there. They just pump all the air out, so that way it feels like you're at 28,000 feet. Or maybe 22,000 feet, but you're at, roughly, 1,500 feet when you started, because it's in Arizona. So you're at the desert floor there. So you're going up. So you're there, you have an oxygen mask on. They take you up to 22,000 feet, and then they take your oxygen mask off, and then they give you all these things to do, right? They're like, do these math problems. And you're like, okay, this is easy. 2 + 2 is 4. And then it's like, what's the next one? Oh, 5 + 3 is 8. This is too easy. Come on, guys. And then 6 + 2 is 8. Oh, I thought that was tricky. And then 6 + 4. 6 + 4 is a nice number. And I started to zone out. It was just like, they were like, hey, Josh, do your problems. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to enjoy this. Like, total euphoric, just nice and calm. Everything was good. And I'm sitting there staring at everybody and without my oxygen mask on. And they're telling me, Josh, you're going to die if you don't put your oxygen mask on, right? Because this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get you to realize what you're doing, the whole deal. And so eventually what happens is Josh passes out. So I was out. I passed out. The guy reached down and grabbed my head just before it hit the instrument panel that was on the side, because I passed out like this. He's like, oh, there he goes. And I put my mask back on, or they put my mask back on, and I popped through about 30 seconds later. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? How's everybody doing? They're like, do you remember any of that? I'm like, not a lot of it. So I went back and watched the video to sort of see that. But at lower levels, the altitude is crazy. What it can do to you in a short amount of time. The biggest experience I think everybody gets at altitude is just sitting there when you're not acclimated. You'll be sitting somewhere and all of a sudden you'll be like, oh man, was I holding my breath or something? Like you can't breathe. Or on Saturday night, usually whenever I'm there, I can't sleep because of the altitude being high.
And this, where they play Dick's Sporting Goods Park, that's about a third of the altitude you were talking about. It's a mile high. Mm-hmm. It's 8,600 feet. Oh, Greg Vanny played for
hold on. How tall? How many feet in a mile? Just
8,600. Nope. 8,600.
Nope, not even close.
Oh, wait a minute. That's Okay, go ahead.
5,280.
Yeah,
That
where
would
am I
be
getting
or
8,000?
if you're doing nautical, it would be 6,000 6,000 feet is a
Oh,
nautical
I was
mile.
doing Canadian. I'm
That's
sorry.
yes. So
Yes, yes, you're right. Whatever it is that you said.
yes,
yeah,
5,280. Yes,
So when you were at 22,000 feet, you were like 4 times higher than that.
way higher. Yes.
But Greg played for the Rapids, and he said when he would go to training camp at the beginning of the season, he said, trying to play in that altitude, he said, I wasn't even in the same book, much less the same page. He said, I just, I couldn't pass, I couldn't do anything. But he said now with the Galaxy, he said everyone's at a high level of fitness. They're at the end of the season, everyone's very fit. He said it's not going to be as big a problem. He said there will be moments in the game when he said you have to manage what you do. No useless sprinting, not a lot of running when you don't need to run. You need to manage your activity. But he said the other, and there will be moments in the game when it will just hit you, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. He said we're going to have to suffer at some point in the game, and that's okay. Everyone anticipates that. But he said another thing that a lot of people miss is that the ball does travel differently. He said like a goal kick, you have to be aware a goal kick can go from one end to the other.
Yep.
Your keeper has to be aware of that. Passes, he said, if you're trying to pass to a teammate that's far away, don't try to put it in the first row like you might at Dignity Health Sports Park, because it's going to go to the 10th row.
Right.
You have to strike it in a different way. You have to keep the ball lower. The ball moves differently, runs differently on the grass. And I remember covering a U.S. national team game in Mexico City where Michael Bradley scored from the center stripe. And we asked him about that afterwards, and he was very smart. He said, I knew we were at altitude. The goalkeeper was out. I knew if I hit the ball, I can't get the ball from the center stripe into the goal at sea level, but I knew I could do it from altitude, and he did. He scored. And so you have to be sort of aware the ball is going to move differently at altitude, and that might be the hardest part.
Anybody who's ever played golf at altitude will take that one in. It's just, you suddenly think you're real strong. That and the relative humidity in Colorado is usually much drier than it is here in California. So the air's not as humid, which means it's not as thick. It doesn't slow the ball down as much, which means you have to drink more water, and then at altitude, you already get dehydrated. And so you're dehydrated, but also there's a lack of water, a lack of moisture in the air. So then you get even further dehydrated. So it's really important for them to sort of do that. The LA Galaxy, by the way, will be traveling to Colorado tomorrow in the AM on Tuesday, right? So they'll be there in the AM. They actually say that on the schedule, at least, that they are doing some training in the PM whenever they get there. I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll do a walkthrough or something like that. It won't be anything major, but the Galaxy will be there. This time of year, also, you could get some thunderstorms and some other stuff that pop up, so sometimes travel in and out of Colorado can be a little bit of an issue. But Dick's Sporting Goods Park is it's weird because it is very much a carbon copy of Dignity Health Sports Park, but without any of like the upper decks or the closed section. It was a budget Dignity Health Sports Park, and like they just decided to put none of the cool stuff in it.
And it's in the middle of like a prairie. So if it does get windy
it's not anymore. Do you know where it is now? Which, by the way, you are 100% correct. When you went, it was probably in the middle of a prairie.
I was there in June. I saw a bunch of prairie dogs as I was walking back to my hotel.
The prairie dogs that had the plague, by the way. Did you hear about that? That's the prairie dogs.
No,
I
didn't take their temperature or check their pulse or anything.
But it's in a bunch of houses now too. There's houses right next door.
Oh, around, yeah. But there's still that sort of prairie thing, and if the wind comes through, it can start to really howl.
I agree 100%. But no, it's one of those. It's one of these things. It's one of the hardest road trips for the LA Galaxy just because of the altitude. So having to count on that, having to get those things is going to be interesting. But Galaxy do have, I think, some advantage here. One is that the real speed that I think Colorado did have with Kevin Cabral is not there, as Kevin Cabral is still injured. Watching them against Minnesota, I think that the backline defense, which has sort of been patched together, but Reggie Cannon is back there now. In fact, we can even pull up their lineup against Minnesota so we can see it. But with Reggie Cannon in the back there, they're good. They should be a better defense than they are. Watching that Minnesota game, they seem susceptible to speed. And what do the Galaxy have in spades? Speed. How much will the Galaxy be able to use that speed? It's certainly a question mark, but you're going to get Dejan Joveljic, sort of at that 9 spot. So you're going to be able to use guys like Joseph Paintzel and Gabriel Peck on the outside. So I think there's some advantages to using speed because watching them play against Minnesota, that was the biggest thing I saw, is that they are susceptible to being dribbled through. And I think with the LA Galaxy's movement, they could do it. But what's going to be the key to all of this, Kevin, is certainly going to be the LA Galaxy scoring first. And we talk about how important that is, and it's stupid to say that. But if you go back and look at the LA Galaxy's last 4 games, they scored first in one of them. They lost 2 of those. right? Allowing the first goal on the road is almost a perfect way to ensure that you lose. So one of the things Minnesota did was get out front in the 14th minute. Granted, it was in Minnesota, but get out front early for the LA Galaxy. It is such a beneficial thing for them. Whenever they go through and score first, they are 14-1-2 on the season. They've scored 43 goals while allowing 21, so they double their scoring than their opponent in those games. The script flips a little bit, 3-6-3. That still means 50% of the time the LA Galaxy walk away with a point or better. Saying that, they're still 3-6-3, majority of losses in that, and the LA Galaxy get outscored 25-20, right? So it's such an important stat for the Galaxy, and especially the way that they play. If they want to be successful on the road, they have to score first against Colorado. And plus, if you watch the Minnesota game, watching Colorado chase Minnesota was the reason that Minnesota was able to open up other lanes and counterattacks to be able to put the game away. And what are the Galaxy really good at? And I think at one point leaded the lead is in transition goals. And so the Colorado having to chase the game, having to put pressure forward, and then having to face those counterattacks is going to be super important to the Galaxy. I don't think that's not an outrageous statement. These are all, pedestrian views on what it takes to win a game, but they're going to be super important. It'll be about doing the small things. I think Greg Vanney said it, but also looking at how they have to approach this is if you take care of everything you're supposed to take care of, if you don't put yourself at an obvious risk, then I think the LA Galaxy can easily beat the Colorado Rapids. I don't think these two teams are that close in talent, to be honest. So that's my take.
Well, and we talked a little bit about home field. Well, we've been talking for a month about home field advantage and how important it is. Again, the Galaxy, the only unbeaten team at home. I don't count the Rose Bowl game as a home game. The only unbeaten team in MLS at home. If they can get the home field advantage for the playoffs, it'll be a big help. They're going to have to play LAFC at some point, presumably, and when they've gone there in the previous two playoff appearances, they've lost. So, and they just beat LAFC in Dignity Hill Sports Park. So that's a big difference. But we're losing sight maybe of some of the other history of this month. Yes. If they win the conference, it'll be the first time they've done that since 2011. That was an MLS Cup championship year.
It was also a Supporters Shield year, 2011.
And if they get 6 more goals, they will equal the modern day record. Remember, we're not talking about back in the day when they didn't allow ties. 6 more goals in 3 games. They will finish with 69. That would tie the 2014 team, most goals in the modern era, another MLS Cup team.
Yep, absolutely. No, those are important things. I think maybe look at the history of when the last time the LA Galaxy actually won in Colorado, Kevin. That's always a good one, right? June 21st, 2017. The last time the LA Galaxy won in Colorado. So it hasn't happened in a little while. It's been 5 years, even more than that. Let's see, 3, 4. I mean, so it's been 7 years. 7 years since the LA Galaxy have won in Colorado. There's a famous win in Colorado. And I think that happened in 2014, possibly, whenever the LA Galaxy were down, I think 2-0 at halftime. Bruce Arena went into halftime and said, I think you're going to see something from this team. Comes out, told that to Kelly Tennant, who was the sideline reporter. I remember this specifically. And he comes out, and Kelly Tennant goes, Bruce, what are you expecting in the second half? He goes, I think we're going to see something from this team in the second half. Yeah, it was sort of like he challenged them. He said, show me something here. And the Galaxy went on to win 3-2, ended up, sort of catapulting them towards the playoffs in that particular time. And that went on for the LA Galaxy who won an MLS Cup that year. A win in Colorado could do something similar.
Well, and Greg talked a little bit. He was asked, I think Damian Calhoun asked him the same question that we've asked him before. It's like the difference between last year and this year. Last year, they won 8 games. This year, they've already won 17. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs. This year, they're fighting for the division, the conference championship. And he did talk about the fans. He said the energy's been different. The fans have been behind them. But he said coming out of last season, everyone was gnashing their teeth and saying this is a terrible team. 8 wins, the lowest the Galaxy have ever had, in a regular, full regular season. And he said the whole beginning of this year, it just had a different energy and there was a different emotion from day one. And the guys have been able to capitalize on that. And he said, and then once they started to get results, it started to snowball. But he did talk about the different energy and the different emotion around the team. And that to me is, you go back in May of last season, there was the supporters boycott.
Mm-hmm.
There was a whole problem with the front office. The people in the front office that were presumed to be the problem, neither one of them are there anymore. The front office different. I saw the whole front office out there, by the way, on the field today. And you used to see guys wander out occasionally. Sometimes they didn't even go through the fence to watch practice. But there today, watching the entire practice, as far as I could tell, Mikey Stevens, who you want to call him Michael now, right?
He has earned it. He's not a child. He's not a young buck anymore. He is a front office staff member, and he deserves the Michael. So yes, Michael Stevens.
It's very, very friendly. Michael Stevens, Esquire, was there.
Yes.
Will Kuntz was there.
Uh-huh.
Gordon Clifton was there. Everybody was out there watching the entire training session, participating in a sense. I mean, they didn't go down there and run drills, but they were watching. They were taking it all in. So it is a different vibe, and I think if you can remember back to how ugly it was last spring, the spring of 2023, and how it is now, there is a different vibe. And you and I, at least me, I'll say me, I've been waiting for this team to exhibit some of the traits of last year, which, when they got down, they quit.
Right.
They did. In 2023, you can't deny that when the going got tough, they left.
They also had like 6 season-ending injuries. That usually means that you're not going to win a lot of games. But yes, I agree with you. Mentality-wise, they weren't there.
And this year, how many times have we seen them come back?
Yeah, no, a bunch of times. By the way, if you were going to put Will Kuntz on the soccer field, would he be a center back or a target striker?
No, he would be a goalkeeper.
He would be. You think he would be a goalkeeper? What is he, like, 6'5"?
6'. I think he's 6'13".
6'13". He's gigantic. Yeah. Him standing next to Michael Stevens, is that a good photo op, or like does Will have to come down and Michael Stevens have to? Yes.
You know what? Point that out that there are people that don't know from what would it be, where you drive as you're driving around the parking lot, down the field is sunken, and there's steps you have to take down, maybe a dozen steps. Mm-hmm. Will Kuntz is always 2 steps below Michael Stevens.
Right.
So
they can see eye to eye.
Eye to eye.
That's right.
Yeah. One of them is about 11 feet taller than the other.
That's right. That's how it goes. By the way, Raphael, $5 super chat says, "Thanks, Killer Peas." Pato and Panda said, "We're Killer Peas too. We didn't even notice that."
Oh, and we're DPs too.
That we're something. That's for sure. Yeah. Will you guys be at the game on Saturday? I will be at the game on Saturday.
I will be at the game on Saturday. Yes.
Okay, good. Then yes, we will both be at the game on Saturday.
And we'll be down at the end of the at the stairwell.
Yes, perhaps. We will at halftime. I will be there for sure, 100%. By the way, somebody in the chat room asked about Ricky Puig and the Spain rumors that are going on, right? And is it Girona that is possibly looking after him? I watched this. I looked at it. Basically, what it tells me is that they don't have the money to get him, and they're looking to get him on loan. The Galaxy aren't going to loan out Ricky Puig. That ain't happening. And they quite honestly are looking for a payday for Ricky Puig. So unless anybody can find the money, and it will not be cheap, unless anybody can find the money, then, we'll see sort of how that goes. I mean, now that Ricky Puig plays defense, Mayo Yoshida was even shocked and saw it. No one couldn't believe that Ricky Puig ran back 40 yards to stop somebody in the box. He goes, "I think that's the first time I ever saw that." It's still probably one of the funniest things I've ever heard a player say about another player, just because it's hysterical. But yes, now that Ricky Puig plays defense, his price doubles.
But you know what? That's a good point that you pointed out. First of all, Mayo Yoshida, great guy, and he is very funny, and he wears that captain's armband for a reason. He's the guy that can talk like that. But I would think that from what limited stuff we know, and again, back in the day before COVID, we were in the dressing room and you could see the interaction of guys. You got to know who was a guy that had a good sense of humor. We don't really have that insight anymore.
Right.
But I will say Ricky Puig, just from the way he seems to react to some social media stuff, seems to be kind of a little bit of a touchy guy.
Could be.
For Mayo Yoshida to pull that off, I think that tells us that the dressing room is really together and really in a really good place, that they're enjoying each other. They can kid each other. They can say something like that. Winning, of course, helps that. But that's the kind of stuff that keeps it loose. Like, hey, don't get too up on your high horse, because we're going to rattle your cage a little bit when you start playing defense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's sort of the thing that happens in a locker room anyway, is that nobody's immune from being made fun of, and everybody needs to be at the same level, right? Like, you don't let anybody get too high, you don't let anybody get too low either, right? So you're not trying to push that. Maybe Zlatan needs to learn that. I'll stick by that for everything I see. But no, it is about the LA Galaxy. I think they are very well together. I think they get along very well from everything that we're seeing. We were talking to AJ Delagarza. He was like, hey, not everybody needs to love each other, the type of thing. But I remember those teams in 2014 and how well everybody got along. I remember those teams in 2012, 2013, 2011, 2010. Those teams got along. They probably got along because they were winning a lot, and that usually helps, right? But it's also, I think that getting along can sometimes, when everybody's on that same page, when everybody understands that everybody in the locker room is doing something. I mean, there's real, honest to God, big support for guys who come off the bench like Miguel Berry, right? Like everybody in the locker room loves Miguel Berry. So there's nobody who's being left out in the cold on this, as far as I can see. Dejan Jovalic, he sort of has that striker mentality, and he wants to be on the field all the time and do all that stuff. You had Novak Mitrovic, who caused some problems, and he got sat because of it, right? And now he's back in, and hopefully he understands.
And did you hear any players coming to his defense? I didn't hear anyone.
Nope.
It was like, yeah, that guy's got to learn his lesson.
It is what it is. We know why he did. And by the way, players sometimes will be like, I get why he did it, and that's fine. But like, also, you got to deal with the consequences if you're going to do it, and I agree with that too. So yeah, I just think that this LA Galaxy team has a chance in the last 3 games to do something kind of special. I'm not one that believes that you have to win all those games, Kevin, but you have to feel good about how you end everything. And so even if the Houston game, and I think the Galaxy would be lucky to have it not mean anything, even that Houston game, you still want to go out there and still put something, but you also, that's the game that if it doesn't mean anything, you're going to rotate out of starters, after the first half and sit some guys and be like, it doesn't matter. We're not here to play this anymore,
You know what this team reminds me of a little bit, and I know that it's the Galaxy, it's the big franchise in the league, and they have some high-paid players, and they have some guys who've done things and played in World Cups. But it reminds me of a baseball team I covered, the 2003 Marlins, when they won the World Series. They weren't supposed to do anything. That was just a collection of guys that caught fire all at the same time. It was extremely fun to cover, and I got to imagine it was probably the best year, most enjoyable year any of those players ever had.
Right.
Just because everybody was on the same page and they're doing things that weren't expected. I kind of feel this team's a little bit different, and I don't know if you can really say this wasn't expected. They were expected to get to the playoffs. They thought they were going to be a good team. I don't think anybody really thought they'd go into the last 3 weeks of the season competing for a supporter shield, home field advantage in the playoffs, beating 2 records from the Bruce Arena years, wins and goals. I don't think anyone anticipated that. And it's got to be fun for that team to not only compete at that high level, but maybe at a level people didn't expect them to compete at, to maybe prove people a little bit wrong.
Well, it's funny because the Galaxy are in this sort of race for the playoffs and race to clinch things and all that. But we know that there's like behind the scenes stuff going on where, Will Kuntz and staff are getting ready for next year too. They're already looking at targets and all those other things. I mean, there's going to be some players that you may not see in a regular season game ever again for the LA Galaxy. If I'm going to guess, and this is a guess, this is not reporting, I want to make that very clear. I'm about to guess things. I think that Dejan Jovalic might not be here next year because you have a guy who played well. I think he's going to age out of the U22 program next year. So the LA Galaxy would have to figure out how to fit him in somewhere else, but the Galaxy could move him somewhere in the offseason, then reinvest that money into another U22 player. The Galaxy could go and move somebody like Ricky Puig. I think it's going to be too early for that, but that's one to watch. We talked about Martin Cáceres and whether or not he would be back, and it doesn't look like, again, that he's going to be back before this is over. So you might have seen the last of Martin Cáceres with this team. So there's Mark Delgado possibly not coming back. I mean, there's lots of things that are going to start happening. So just from the mile high perspective of someone who has been there before and you never know when you're going to see somebody and when you're not, it's important, I think, to recognize that everything that there's going to be players that don't come back after the regular season and after the playoffs, that type of thing, that they're not going to come back. And that means this LA Galaxy team is going to look different next year. You can't always catch lightning in a bottle, Kevin, especially when there's going to be 30 teams next year. So your chances of winning go down just by the nature of that there's another team in Major League Soccer next year. So yes, you can make all the right moves, but to do what the LA Galaxy have done this year, you can't sit there and say, oh, well, you're not going to try to win MLS Cup this year. You have to try to win MLS Cup this year because you put yourself in a position to be able to win MLS Cup this year.
Yeah, and you can't say in MLS of all leagues, you can't say, oh, yeah, we've laid the foundation for next year because you don't know how many of these players are going to be back next year. I think you're right to sort of focus on Mark Delgado. I think there's sort of 3 midfielders there that feel to me redundant, and I know you're going to tell me that they aren't, but Mark Delgado, Gaston Brugman, and Edward Cerrillo, I think maybe
Edwin Cerrillo, and he's not going anywhere. So that's the one where you're like, he's done. So he's a locked in.
So maybe one of the other two doesn't come back.
Mark Delgado on an option year. The LA Galaxy get to decide on his option in December. So whether or not they bring him back or not, I still think that they would. I think Gaston Brugman might be the one that doesn't come back.
Yeah, and I think Edwin Cerrillo has played really well and
absolutely
proven that he needs to be back. I don't know what the contract situation is on Diego Fagundes. I think you must know, but he's been a really super valuable guy. and he's proven that he can be an important player. And maybe his thing is like, you know what, guys, I love coming off the bench 19 times or whatever it was, but I really want to go somewhere and play every game. And I think the Galaxy would do what they could to reward him for what he's done. But if he wants to come back and be that super sub, I think the Galaxy would love to have him back. He's just proven too valuable.
Fagundes signed through 2025, club option for 2026. So,
well, that answers that.
Well, I mean, I think it does. There's always the chance that you can move somebody whenever there's 1 year. I mean, 1 year that Dejan Jovalic also signed all the way through 2025. Could move him in the summer if you wanted to. So that way the Galaxy could start with, sort of that. The whole thing with Jovalic, though, for me is that, like, unfinished business. I feel like this is a guy who might as well have won the Golden Boot this year had he played all the games and wasn't injured. And I feel like he's such a vital, important part. Not saying that another 9 can't do what he does, because I think they can. Maybe Lewandowski's going to be done with Barcelona, and you want to slide him into a TAM spot, and of course, because all the big DPs now come in on TAM money. I'm falling into that trap like all the other guys. But maybe he comes into that spot. Maybe you can move Jovalic out. Maybe that makes some sense. Maybe you get some money out of that. Maybe you can reinvest it in a U22 striker to back up an older striker. So there's options here. But I think that you're going to see in the last 3 games that some of these things are sort of they're going to start figuring themselves out. Gaston Brugman coming off the bench, Mark Delgado coming off the bench, those types of things. Won't probably with Royce hurt. And so I would expect that Mark Delgado probably starts and Cerrillo's in there with Delgado and Puig. But having said that, the Galaxy are going to have to make some choices, and I think you're going to start to see that here pretty soon.
Well, and Bruce Arena used to talk about this a lot, and the salary structures changed now with TAM money and JAM money and U22 initiatives and all this stuff. But back in the day, it used to be, if you had a successful season, that means a lot of guys played really well.
Right.
That means a lot of guys in those contract or option years, you want them to come back because they're important, but you also want to reward them for what they've done. And the best way you can reward them is to make sure they get paid. And that's why the Galaxy had to part with guys like Sean Franklin and Donovan Ricketts, Marcelo Sarvis. They didn't want those guys to go. They didn't want to lose them. And people say, oh, well, they didn't even make them an offer. The offer they made them was, hey, go somewhere else and make more money than you can make here because you deserve it. And, Jovalic could be that guy in that situation, a young guy who's going to want to be, 23, 24, entering the prime of his career, a chance to make some money. The Galaxy will turn around and say, we've already got 3 DPs. Here's what we can offer you.
Right.
But if you go somewhere else, we hope that you make a lot of money because you deserve it. And it's kind of a tough line to straddle because you want your team to win, but you also want to be a good guy in a stand-up franchise and reward players for humping for you. And so that's how you do that.
Andrew Alisana in there. Andrew, always nice to talk to you. Appreciate you. $5 super chat. We could lose half our roster, and I would still feel confident because of Will Kuntz. Not wrong. There is a feeling of optimism in there. By the way, why are we talking about this? Is also in the chat room. Why are we talking about the G's leaving it all right now? I know. It's just because you're going to start seeing rumors. That's why. I know the Solari rumors are out there, and the LA Galaxy were interested in Solari at one point, and whether or not they would still be is a good question to ask. It's not one you're going to get an answer to until the end of the season, right? It's one of those. We can ask lots of questions. I find it's better to, right now, yes, there's a focus on next year. Yes, the LA Galaxy are planning and preparing for that. But you're not going to get the answers to your questions if you ask those right now because it's about what's happening on the field right now, and they don't want to take anything away from that. So, again, the LA Galaxy getting ready to play the Colorado Rapids. This is 6:30 p.m. is your kickoff time, so an hour earlier because it's Mountain Time. And, of course, that's on Wednesday, October 2nd. MLS Season Pass is where you can find it. Colorado 15-11-5 had a great season under Armas, doing really, really well. But
I think they're second in the conference in wins.
They might be second in the conference. We could look that up here in a second. Hold on. Why not? Why not look up at the wins? 15 wins, tied with LAFC, which is second in the conference for wins. Absolutely. So Colorado has been playing well. They're a dangerous team and something the LA Galaxy certainly have to watch out about. And so, again, I think there's ways for the Galaxy to upset Colorado in Colorado and to take points from Colorado. But I think that's going to be a difficult ask. I mean, Colorado 10-2-3 at home. They've only lost 2 games at home all year. You're asking the LA Galaxy to go in there. I think this one might even be harder than the Houston game. Just understanding what it is. So if you're the LA Galaxy, taking a point in Colorado is not the worst thing in the world. Getting a win and watching other people falter and then being able to claim, sort of that rightful Western Conference home field advantage slot would be even better for the Galaxy. I think right now, if you're looking at standings and where the LA Galaxy finished, they finished first or second, and that's it. I think that I don't see them falling any further than that, but first or second is where I see them going. And I think this Wednesday night game, midweek, middle of the week, I think this is one to sort of watch. Again, Colorado coming off their game in Minnesota. They had to travel to Minnesota. They came back down. There's more miles on their legs right now than the LA Galaxies. Let's see if the LA Galaxy can sort of
put the standings back up so we can talk a little bit about how clueless I am on this, because
Yes.
I'm going to tell you how I understand the playoff scenario, and I know it changes every 5 minutes. So in the last 5 minutes, it may have changed, but what's the difference between finishing first and second? Because until you play that other team, you have home field advantage, right? So if the Galaxy finished first and LAFC finishes second, LAFC doesn't go on the road until they play the Galaxy, right? So
correct.
What does it mean? So Galaxy finished first. If the Galaxy finished first, then they play in the first round, which is best 2 out of 3.
Right.
They would play the winner of the playoff, a wild card game between Vancouver and Portland.
No, between Portland and Minnesota.
Portland and Minnesota, I'm sorry. And then the second place team would then play Vancouver. So you get a team that's already played a wild card game, and was ninth in the conference, right?
Right.
And, as opposed to a team that made the playoffs and got a chance to take a few days to gather themselves. Then after that, the number one team always plays the lowest remaining seed. So they would always be somebody from the lower half of the bracket. If you finish second, you could potentially get someone from the top half of the bracket, right? Is it reseeded after each game, or is it just?
No, it's set into a bracket and it rolls from there. So it's 1 versus 9. If 9, I think, would take over. If, like, say, if one plays the 8-9, right, then that 8-9 takes over the 1 sort of spot. Now they're going to be the lower seeded team in that because the team would be higher than them, so they're going to be on the road still, but they would take that place in the bracket. So
there are advantages other than just being the home team. The higher you finish, theoretically, unless there's a big upset, the lower seeded team is the team that you would continue to play.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, if everything played off the way, if the playoffs started right now, the Western Conference Final will be between the LA Galaxy and LAFC, right? Because it would go to 1-2 in that, and that right now seems like that. Ultimately, that seems like a good predictor of what we expect, right? We expect that those two teams are playing the Western Conference Final. They've been the best teams in the West. Not saying RSL couldn't be there, not saying Colorado couldn't be there, but LA and LAFC probably should be the two teams in the Western Conference. If you're going to take into account the whole regular season and how everybody's played, that seems fair. But depending on who's 1 and who's 2 means that Western Conference Final is either held at Dignity Health Sports Park or it's held at BMO Stadium. So those are the things that go back and forth on this, is that it really does matter. We've always talked about it. And then if you even want to flip it over to, the Supporter Shield and look at the Supporter Shield right now, the LA Galaxy currently holding off Columbus. Columbus, however, is 1 game behind the LA Galaxy, so they have a game in hand on the LA Galaxy, so they're going to make that up. And it seems likely to me that Miami will clinch at some point here the Supporter Shield. I don't think they're not going to be Supporter Shield winners, but Miami is going to clinch that Supporter Shield. The LA Galaxy are either going to finish second or third in that. That's my guess. Second or third in that Supporter Shield, which then means if the LA Galaxy were the Western Conference champions, they would pull that off, that they would host any of the other teams outside of Miami or Columbus if it should go that way. And we can even pull up the Eastern Conference whenever we look at it. That means that the LA Galaxy very well would finish above Cincinnati and host Cincinnati if they made it, or Orlando, who's coming on strong. Sasha Kleshman very happy about his Orlando pick at the beginning of the year, starting to come alive here at the very end. But Orlando would have to come to the LA Galaxy. New York City, if they finish, would have to come to the Galaxy. New York Red Bulls would have to come to the Galaxy. Charlotte would have to come to the Galaxy. If Toronto or Philadelphia made it that far, they'd have to come to the Galaxy. So you're increasing your chance of hosting an MLS Cup by the higher you finish, and the highest the Galaxy can really finish is that first place in the Western Conference. They want to try to finish second in the league, win outright. Win those 3 games outright. Maybe that's important. Maybe that you want to be at home for MLS Cup, and the possibility that Columbus even would have to travel to LA to play. So
yeah, the only thing we know for sure is Miami is not going to play the MLS Cup here. And I still think they're going to lose in the playoffs. I still think Columbus wins the East, and it's possible that game, Columbus and the Galaxy, would be played here. Are we getting ahead of ourselves? Yeah, probably. But I mean, who would have guessed
that we'd be talking about this?
We'd be sitting here talking about home field advantage for MLS Cup. And by the way, Greg talked about that. For those of you who forget how the playoffs are now happen, after that wild card game, the first round of the playoffs at the wild card game is a best 2 out of 3. And Greg Vanney said that he really liked the old home and home series. He thought that was, first of all, soccer fans understood that more. That was more a typical soccer thing. And he said playing that same team 3 times in 1 week, he said it's hard for the players. He thinks it's hard for the coaches. It's hard for the fans. You just see the same people, the same game plans, the same formations, too much. And then after that, it's kind of really weird because that first round, which theoretically is important because you can't win unless you win the first round, but it should get increasingly harder each time. And then the next 3 rounds are all single elimination.
Home and home. Home and home is still the best way to do it. Soccer fans agree, right? Everybody agrees home and home. It's just the owners who wanted that extra.
Well, I think it's Apple TV wanted the extra.
They basically get the same amount of games almost regardless. It's just they wanted, there's like 1 or 2 extra games you can get with the best of 3. And it's just like, why not just go to home and home for everything? Because you know why, Kevin? Because you have too many teams in the playoffs now, and it takes too long to play off the home and home because it's 2 games.
By the way,
time.
if you have 9 teams out of a 14-team conference, that's too many. You've played all season to eliminate 5 teams. And when you have the home and home, and I think MLS went back and forth with this, do you like the better team record-wise, the higher seed? Should they open at home or should the second game be at home?
I always like the second game being at home because you knew what you had to do and you could come back if you needed to do it. But there's arguments that it's better to be why don't you let them pick? You know, if there's really that let's have the first game at home. You know, let's take them out right now. I don't know.
Like a coin flip, like we like to receive, and and the other thing I think is if you go to penalty kicks or extra time, having that at home in front of especially the penalty kicks in front of your own fans is really what you want.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, the single is okay. If you're going to be single, then make the first round single too. You know, it's like this whole best of 3 is just some.
Well, you go 1. It's the wild card game is single elimination. Then all of a sudden you have best 2 out of 3, and that's 1-1-1. It just doesn't really. I don't understand the rhyme or reason to it.
I'm watching a video somebody tagged me in Twitter. It's of Julian Araujo, who's now with Bournemouth, right? So he's with Bournemouth, and he says, "Hey, if we beat Southampton, I'll come back to the pub and celebrate." He went back to the pub and celebrated whenever they beat him. So Julian Araujo at the pub, hanging out with the fans, doing all the stuff we expected him to do. Kevin,
what was he drinking? Was he drinking Corona? Or was he drinking some of that?
British? I don't think they sell Corona at the pub there, bud. I think you're in trouble. Lorena, by the way, hi Josh, I met you at the Atlanta game. Lorena, hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for jumping into the podcast. Certainly. Feel the Berm says, can we qualify for Champions Cup after this weekend? They haven't given me a breakdown. But if the Galaxy are guaranteed, and they're not yet, so that's sort of where I think. Let's see what happens, and I'll get you the actual math. But they could.
I think they could because
with
they would
a win,
first or second.
Yeah, they would clinch first or second, right? So with a win,
and
they
LAFC's already qualified.
Yep.
So that means even if they finish second
they would still get there. I think that's correct. I agree. I just haven't done the math. So yes, feel the berm. Of course, we'll look at it a little bit.
So there was something at stake.
There you go. So, by the way, Mr. Provino says, go to MLS Next Pro. You get to pick your opponent. How about that? So how about you finish first in the conference? You're like, who do we want to play? We want to play you. You know, it's like that type of thing. That would be fun.
Should we explain that Champions Cup thing? Because it's a little bit confusing. Basically, there's a lot of ways to qualify for Champions Cup. If you finish in the top 3 in Leagues Cup, in other words, make it to the final or win the 3rd place game, you qualify. If you finish at the top of the conference, you qualify. If you make MLS Cup, you qualify. But there is also sort of a clause which says if another team, the team finishes ahead of you, for example, if LAFC were to beat the Galaxy in the conference standings,
right,
and therefore take that Champions Cup spot because they finished first,
right.
They already have one from making the League Cup final and from winning U.S. Open Cup, by the way.
Right.
So they already have that.
That's why Sporting Kansas City made it into CONCACAF Champions Cup because LAFC had already got in there. Yep.
So Sporting Kansas City is going to have their worst season since I think 2009, and they're going to go to Champions Cup. The Galaxy would get it because even though they finished second to LAFC, if that happened, LAFC's already got a Champions Cup bid. So Galaxy would then inherit theirs.
100%. So yeah, it's something to watch. And trust me, as soon as it clinches, we'll know. We'll be able to figure that one out whenever we get to the stadium on Saturday. So we'll do it.
Does this seem unnecessarily complicated? Some of this stuff?
No, your brain is more simple. You just like simple things. You're just like, hey, do this. Like the NBA roster rules,
like 8,000 feet above sea level.
Right? Like, yeah, exactly. 100%. I'm 1 mile, right? Almost 2, actually. But like it's like the NBA roster rules are very complicated and blah blah blah, the whole deal. So people always talk about MLS roster rules being complicated, which they are. But so are, some are the NBA's, and the NHL has its quirks, and Major League Baseball has its quirks. You've just been around it longer, so you know how it is. Yes, I would like it to be simpler. Yes, I think the playoffs are. By the way, this is a great take to have after the LA Galaxy have missed the playoffs for so many years. I think they let too many teams into the playoffs. Where last year you'd be like, just the Galaxy fans are like, just get them in the whatever 9th. Yeah. I don't care, the whole deal. But they finished 13th.
Pull the ladder up behind us, people.
Right, 100%. So Gary, by the way, $2 super chat. Rad show, gentlemen. Gary, we always appreciate you stopping by. LA Galaxy taking on Colorado Rapids coming up at 6:30 p.m. on MLS Season Pass. That's what's happening this Wednesday. And then, of course, Saturday, it is Fan Appreciation Day. Should we go over it one more time? Does Josh have the fan appreciation numbers? Of course he does. I want
to go back to that last super chat. He said rad. Is that good?
Yeah, that's still good.
Oh, that's
as far as I know. I've stopped understanding kids these days, which is starting to make me feel very old. Like they say things and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Like, and I kept up on all this stuff for so many years, and now I just gave up. I waved the white flag. I'm old now, I guess. LA Galaxy overall on Fan Appreciation Day, 14-5-8 total all time. Such a huge margin, Kevin. They usually win on Fan Appreciation Night, except Fan Appreciation since 2013, 1 win, 4 losses, 6 draws. That's what Fan Appreciation is.
And most of those seasons ended with that game, so not much for the fans to appreciate. But by the way, this year, a little different.
That 1 win since 2013 came in 2017 when the LA Galaxy were very much eliminated and won the wooden spoon that year. So yeah, good times, lots of good times. So it should be good. Listen, I was looking at the schedule and I was getting all excited just for playoff soccer that's coming. Like, it's getting a little bit colder. Of course, there's a heat wave on its way, but it's getting a little bit colder. I was wearing sweatshirts. It was the air was heavy with dew. It was like, it is time for that playoff soccer. You could smell it in the air. It was time. And so these last 3 games, we sort of said it whenever they played LAFC. We said it whenever they played Vancouver. The playoffs have already started because you're trying to secure your spot. You're already into games that you need to win, that you must win. I'm never going to say, you're not going to get me saying Colorado's must win, but it's a game that if you could take 3 points from, which I think they're capable of, if you can take 3 points from, you have done basically the next thing to clinching, because I think there's going to be some other teams that still drop points as we go. So,
well, and Greg talked about today, you really want to feel good coming out of these last 3 games, which is very hard to do with the start, stop nature. You want to get healthy. You want to get some rhythm. You want to feel good. You want to feel confident. Regardless of whether even if LAFC loses and the Galaxy clinch, believe me, they're going to play hard against Houston and Austin because they're going to want to feel good going into those playoffs.
Doesn't surprise
me. And by the way,
mm-hmm.
a great Galaxy team that we have honored tonight by dissecting their roster as they go forward and talking about who's not going to be here next year.
Yeah, I know,
so,
right?
Yeah, we did a good job.
Hey, by the way, pay attention, because some of these, I just always like people. It's very easy to get lost in that this is always going to stay the same. And in MLS, we know nothing stays the same, right? So we know there's going to be changes. We know things are coming. So that means this team has, 10 games, 12 games left together. And then it will change again. So that's how it works. That's MLS. That's the rules. Things keep going round and round, up and down, like a carousel. Had a little Happy Gilmore, round and round, up and down. Feel the flow. Happy Gilmore 2, by the way, coming out soon, or at least they're taping. They're filming right now. Yes.
My favorite part of the show was when you told your story about college, because I always had you pegged like me as a GED guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I
went. They gave me a Bachelor of Science and everything. I mean, it's crazy. I sometimes don't believe it. I look at it up on the wall. I'm like, really? Are you sure? I even went to class, Kevin. I actually enjoyed college. I could go back. That wouldn't be bad. Except I'm real old now. I don't think it wouldn't be as much fun. But hey, and married.
Train school.
Train school. They have train schools. Don't joke around about that. That's that's one of those things you don't joke. You don't talk about Fight Club. You don't talk about train school. All right. Let's see. $5 super chat from Adam before we go. You might have went over this, but what's the highest points Galaxy has ever had at home? At home.
Oh, good question.
Do I have a chart that says that?
Charts and graphs.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I have a chart that says that.
We will do. That's homework. That's
homework. I will get it, Adam. Thank you. All right.
Thursday or next Monday.
Yeah.
Adam's going to want to know.
Well, I will look it up as soon as we're done here. So, all right. That's where we sit. Anything else, Mr. Kevin? Are you good?
Well, as always, I didn't have anything when we started, so I'm good.
Everybody was well aware of that, as always. All right. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter and X, it's at KBaxter11. Head over to the LA Times, where Kevin masquerades as a soccer writer on occasion, does other sports as well. LATimes.com is where you can find it. Go follow, like his stuff. We certainly appreciate that. If you're looking for me on Twitter and X, at Galaxy Podcast, and then head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com for all of our wonderful shows and all that fun stuff. You can see it, cornerofthegalaxy.com, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple iTunes, all those places is where you can find our show. I hope you had a nice weekend. Hope you're ready to dive right back into the LA Galaxy as they take on Colorado on Wednesday night. All right, that does it for Mr. Kevin, the Panda Baxter. I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.